oradan mı oradan mı sunum yapmak istersiniz? Olur. O zaman buyurun. Öncesinde
Böyle
bir de Arif Bey'e biraz kısa bir söz vereceğim. 5 dakika. Genel müdür yoktu çünkü şimdi geldi. Ama Katie nasıl I'm starting and you can say anything.
I will ask them just any question.
Okay. Evet, başlayalım hemen. Önce bir Arif Bey'i çağıracağım. İşte konuşma yapacağız sonra. Uygun mu?
Uzaksa yine uyarı.
Tamam hocam.
Yani,
15 dakika diyoruz. Çünkü çok
son 5 dakika
bir önceki 45 dakika sardı.
Geçtikten sonra uyarı.
Tamam, tamam hocam. Birinci konuşmacı 45 dakika konuştu. Gördünüz. Ondan sonra çok kaydetti. Evet, değerli Tıp Hukuku Kongresi katılımcıları, bugünün ikinci oturumuna başlayalım artık.
I'd like to welcome you all to the second session of today. I apologize since we are a bit behind the schedule. In this session, we will be talking about the ethical impact of organ donation. Katie and I will be chairing this session. Those issues are multidisciplinary, and we have to take further steps ahead. There are people who have exerted efforts in this issue in Turkey, and we have Arif Popuaz, and I would like to invite him, if you allow me to do so, and he'll be sharing his opinions on this issue. Organ donation, organ transplantation department. He works for the organ transplantation department. Distinguished guests, dear guests from abroad, I'd like to thank Mr. Eyüp Kahveci for inviting us here. The people who have exerted efforts in organ transplantation go through huge challenges, as we see in our country. In organ transplantation, people have to take initiatives, and unfortunately, there are hindrances in this respect. We have to make use of the tissues and organs in the best manner possible. Humans are sacred to us, and even the smallest part of a human being is important to us. That's why they should never ever be used for the purposes of donor trafficking. It shouldn't be the case. And in our country, our legislation tackles human trafficking, donor trafficking. Unfortunately, there are different regulations. That's why we have to consider those rules from an ethical point of view. We work in close cooperation with the dear with the dear doctors in the ministry. I am in charge of dialysis and organ and tissue transplantation. First and foremost, those organs should never be a subject of organ trafficking, and secondly, the recipient should be the most appropriate person possible based on the principle of justice, and the problems that occur should be shared with the people with related people, and we have to decide accordingly. In organ transplantation, I attach huge importance on organ transplantation. That's why I wanted to join this Congress. And what I see is that those problems occur in different corners of the world, not only in Turkey. In the morning session, I found out that there might be some conflicting articles. For instance, what are we going to do when there is a mentally retarded person? I mean, what are we going to do with the psychologically retarded people? First and foremost, a donor should be above the age of 18 and should have no psychological problems. So what are we going to do? For instance, there might be some parents who might give consent to take the organs of mentally retarded children to save the lives of healthy children. I hope this Congress will further shed light on those ethical issues. I'd like to thank the organizers, and I'd like to extend my gratitude to all the participants. I'd like to thank Mr. Akif Kapazı. He's the Vice General Directorate in the Ministry of Health. He delivered a very enlightening speech. First, I'd like to invite the first speaker of today's session. He exerted a lot of efforts and he has represented us in international arena, and with respect to medical law, he has exerted a lot of efforts for Oviedo. We will be taking his contributions, and Oviedo agreements, additional protocol on organ and tissue donation will be his topic. Mr. Chairperson, distinguished colleagues, dear guests, I guess I do not deserve such good words, but Oviedo has been a very important part of my life. I'd like to focus on that. On PowerPoint, I won't focus on PowerPoint, and I have 15 minutes. It's not possible to deliver such a speech in 15 minutes. I would give you a comparative perspective. I would compare Oviedo with Turkish law and the other international law, and in light of them, I would go for an evaluation. However, now it's only Oviedo and additional protocol. With respect to Turkish law, the evaluation will be made by Hakan. He'll be taking floor following my speech. And with respect to Oviedo, Ali Reza Bakavi mentioned Oviedo Convention, and there were a couple of missing points in his presentation, so I'd like to focus on them to give you a better perspective related to Oviedo Convention. Oviedo Convention is made up of 38 articles. That is just the preamble of Oviedo Convention. There are 4 additional protocols to this convention that are in line with the articles of this convention, and those additional protocols regulate specific areas. First comes banning cloning on human beings. Second comes Oviedo was prepared in 1997, and then there was a ban on cloning in 1999, and there's an additional protocol which comes in 2002. Next comes another protocol issued in 2005 about protecting the human beings, and next comes genetic tests and health-related issues and the use of those genetic tests in public health. This additional protocol was issued in 2008, and since then, you know, there's DH-Bio. We have had DH-Bio, and you might ask me as to whether there's a new additional protocol. It looks like we will have a new additional protocol. I'll be talking about it in the afternoon session. It's about cures, it's about treatments, which is involuntary. I cannot talk about this additional protocol right now. However, there is the protocol of European ministers, and I'll be giving you an idea related to this new additional protocol. I'll be providing you a perspective at least. So let me tell you what happened between 2008 and 2017. DH-Bio does not merely go for additional protocols, it prepares guidelines as well. One of those guidelines is about the medical decision, the participation of the patient to the medical decision in the last phase of his or her life. We already prepared this guideline, and it was translated into Turkish. Next guideline, the following guideline will be prepared next month on October 26th, 27th. Probably it will be adopted next month. It's about financial gain. It's about banning financial gain from organ transplantation. Furthermore, the committee prepares recommendations for the Committee of Ministers, and it provides opinions regarding the recommendations. So the additional protocol on involuntary transplantation is one of the areas that we are working on, and we prepare recommendations. We work on giving recommendations to the Committee of Ministers. Moreover, there are some developments in the area of medical law, and within those, in the light of those developments, the committee will pursue its activities. Let me introduce myself a bit. In the program, it says that I'm a member of Kültür University, but I'm a graduate of Istanbul University, the Faculty of Law. I have spent 45 years there, including the BA years. Therefore, I'm of the opinion that I should be deemed as a member of Istanbul University, not Istanbul Kültür University. Regarding the organ and tissue transplantations, let us look into the additional protocol. Unfortunately, when the speaker moves away from the microphone, it cannot be interpreted. I'm not that much used to PowerPoint, but I'm going to do my best to ease your lives. I talked about the Turkish legislation related to organ transplantation in the Oviedo Convention and the additional protocol. It says the following: in Oviedo Convention, 19th article reads as follows. It's about the general rules regarding the organ transplantation. Article 20 is about preserving people who cannot give consent to organ transplantation. I don't think Oviedo Agreement was translated into Turkish in the best way possible. As law people, I am of the opinion that the term consent had to be translated in a better way into Turkish. Anyway, Article 20 is related to preserving the people who cannot give consent to organ transplantation. Article 21 is about financial gains from organ transplantation. Article 22 is about Article 22 is about the organs that have been taken out of human body. If there is required consent, then scientific research might be conducted on those organs taken out. When it comes to additional protocol is made up of 34 or 38 items. For those 4 articles are further detailed in this additional protocol. So a contemporary organ and tissue transplantation scheme or mechanism comes to the fore. One of the most important points to focus on is that both in the convention and the additional protocol, organ transplantation and tissue transplantation might be employed just for the treatment purposes. It's a therapeutic intervention, and that is why it should be for treatment purposes. It should be conducted for treatment purposes at all times. Let us have a look at the items that are not covered by this additional protocol: embryonic or fetal organs, blood and blood-like tissues. There are general rules regarding those items in each and every country. Let us go to Article 19. It's about taking an organ out of a living donor. Under which conditions is it possible? Article 19 is about that. In order to take an organ out of a living body, first we have to make it clear that we cannot take organs out of the deceased bodies, or there should be no alternative methods. If we can take organs out of the deceased, then we should not resort to the living donor. So there is a certain ban in here. In order to take organs from living donors, what can we do? If enlightened consent or informed consent is provided, then we can take organs out of a person. In Oviedo Convention, informed consent is providing information related to the risks, purpose, and purpose of the treatment. So those four principles are of utmost importance in terms of the term enlightening. And the same applies to organ transplantation as well. When we take organs out of the donors, out of a donor, we have to enlighten the donor. We have to enlighten the donor regarding the quality, goals, risks of the organ transplantation. And we have to get a written consent. When it comes to ratifying, once a person is enlightened related to organ transplantation, it has to be ratified by an official authority. Oviedo and additional protocol does not foresee the approval of any authority, because it says each and every individual has right over his or her body, and you can make use of this right, and you don't need to get the consent of another person. Under which conditions consent is given is an issue that we have to dwell upon, and if any consent given might be taken back. There are no restrictions on this issue. The goal, quality, dangers, and the consequence of organ transplantation is not sufficient. The donor has to be informed regarding the rights of this organ transplantation and the safety issues have to be mentioned. Hakan will be elaborating on this issue from the Turkish perspective. So the Turkish law is in parallel with Oviedo Convention up until this point. However, there is one certain point where there is a certain difference between Turkish law and Oviedo. So the Turkish law goes off rail in this regard. Both Oviedo Agreement and Turkish law makes it clear that if one does not give consent, then organ transplantation will not be carried out. When Turkey signed Oviedo Convention, there was a reservation the minor people, the people who cannot give consent, will not go through any organ transplantation. That is what Turkey said and put on a reservation on this convention. On Oviedo, again it says organ transplantation will not be carried out if people cannot give consent. However, if one of the siblings is about to die and there is another sibling who is, let's say, less than 18 years of age, why should it be prohibited? If there are no recipients who cannot give consent, if the donor and recipients are either brothers or sisters, Currently, there are discussions regarding the mother or father of the recipient, and if it has a life-serving purpose for the recipient. Moreover, the legal representative, if the legal representative gives consent to this issue, and if there are no objections to donor to organ transplantation, then organ transplantation might be the case. Both the donor and the recipient have to be enlightened. The recipient also has to be informed regarding the quality, risks, consequences of any organ transplantation. Let us focus on a couple of more points. Oviedo and additional protocol prohibits organ trafficking and there is a convention related to organ trafficking. DH-Bio has impacted this convention. So there is a European Convention prohibiting organ trafficking. Could you please wrap it up? Yes, I'm going to conclude my words very soon. The additional protocol prohibits commercials or advertisements of organ trafficking. Related to organ transplantation, there should be no advertisements. Disclosure is another point that has been addressed. Especially the physicians have to be discreet in disclosing the names of the recipients and donors. It shouldn't be the case. However, unfortunately in Turkey that's not the case. We see the pictures of recipients and donors everywhere. So this point of disclosure has already gone off rail in Turkey. The second part is about taking organs or tissues from the deceased. In yesterday's meetings, you were enlightened about those points. The international law has to tackle this issue. In Turkish law, brain death is the case to us. As a conclusion, let me put it that way. The provisions of additional protocol of Oviedo Convention has impacted some countries in the sense that they have been impacted by Oviedo Convention. For instance, Germany has affected the Oviedo Convention to a great extent, and although they have contributed a lot, they have not signed this, the Germans have not signed this contract. It applies to some other countries as well. Therefore, in my opinion, if Oviedo has become an organic part of Turkish law, Oviedo norms have to be abided by. So the Turkish law has to be in line with the Oviedo Convention. Thank you very much.
Teşekkür ediyoruz.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a contribution with a huge experience, vast experience. We listened to the contribution of protocols to Oviedo Convention. Now we'll listen to another distinguished professor, Professor Dr. Hakan Hakeri from Faculty of Law of Istanbul Medeniyet University, although he served as a faculty dean in other universities. He is one of the scientists who contributes to organ transplantation, and his presentation is titled "The Current Situation in Turkey, the Legal Aspects of Organ Donation." Ladies and gentlemen, I greet you all respectfully. Well, we have familiar faces here. I'm sure you've listened to my presentation repeatedly, so I wouldn't say that it's very original. We delivered with the medical world a lot in the past. In fact, organ transplantation did not interest me that much. However, as Mr. Eyüp invited me to these meetings again and again, I kind of started to take an interest. I donated my organs both in Turkey and Germany. If only we were able to have a pool outside, a ballot where we would be able to take people's consent. Well, medical law has many sub-branches. In fact, I don't know whether you see such news in other areas. It says in fact, capital punishment was cancelled because he donated his organs. It's asparagus, it's fake news. Again, other sort of news. You have the internet. You just search, "I am looking for kidneys." You will immediately spot the people who are eager to sell or who are eager to do the trafficking for organs. Well, we do not create laws for every specific issue, but why do we create a law for organs and laws? In fact, it is a good legal arrangement, but why did we publish it in 1979? Why do we need it? Well, we have several reasons for this. One of them is about the fact that a living person gives away an organ to another person out of sudden. So we cannot consider that to be normal. First, we need a legal arrangement which clearly, expressly states the reason for a living donor, the donation by a living donor to another person. I mean, if there wasn't any legal arrangement, that would be against the law. However, here the main factor is indication. The main element is indication. The person is intact. There is no health-related problem. Can they give it to them? So that's what the law arranges as the second factor. The third one relates to death, concerns to death. So death also is defined by law, and every country defines or determines the definition of death according to that. Again, which model for living transplant? I mean, do we take the organs of the deceased automatically? Then we need a model which is again described by a law, because you are working on the bodies of individuals. It is quite interesting that there are two regulations in Turkey. One is the law on organ and issue transplantation, as I just mentioned, and the criminal code, which includes certain provisions. Maybe our Turkish colleagues already know it, but I can emphasize this for our international guests, and they can inform me, by the way, about their situation. In your criminal codes, do you have any provisions regarding organ transplantation? This is atypical because criminal code refers to general types of crimes, and the other ones are included in the special provisional laws, and we see special provisions for organ transplantation. However, in 2002, these aspects are included in the general criminal code. Was it necessary? No, it was not necessary. But I'm curious about your cases. I don't think that the general criminal codes include laws on organ transplantation, and I would be curious to learn from you. Our professor warned us about how to call this, so I will not say cadaver, I will say deceased from now on. The consent model is the most debated one, and I'm sure that our colleagues here as part of ITN heard about the Turkish law, and we have exception However, our exception is opt-in rather than an automatic assumption. Okay, what about the death? It's brain death. Does our law regulate it clearly? No. It says medical state of death in relation to the application of this act is determined unanimously by applying the rules of evidence-based medicine. However, that is very important here, as in fact the civil law arranges life. It should also arrange the death too, I think. Well, that is very important in terms of criminal law. We tell students about how to determine a person's moment of death or the crimes involved, but we tell them you should look at the law on organ, tissue, transplantation law. Is a very old book. It tells the irreversible death of brain and central neural system. So, in fact, it also gives a clear definition of cerebral death. So, legally speaking, in fact, we do not have any discussion about the definition of death as regards to its cerebral nature. But do we, in fact, have any legal arrangement as required by the convention? Yes, we arrange it by regulation, by law, but we do not provide a definition which includes cerebral death. We just say evidence-based death or medical evidence-based death. I think it should be arranged with the definition of, with the wording of cerebral death, and it should be arranged in the civil law rather than the criminal law. Okay, what about the courts? Is there any discussion about the brain death? No, there isn't any court decision about the brain death, or there is also no case which has been brought to the court or to prosecutor because of brain death. For example, a person may die because of cerebral death, but it is not taken to the court. I don't know who mentioned it yesterday. Maybe it was Professor Ibrahim. Anyway, a prosecutor checks the patient and the brain death hasn't taken place, they say, so they didn't let the procedure to continue. I will share my own experience too, but now let's focus here. If there is a criminal case, and maybe we should determine it for our international participants, if there is a suspicion of death, prosecutors want autopsy as a legal necessity, but others say, well, we cannot use these organs if you run an autopsy, and we cannot use the organs of people for donation, and there is this conflict. However, I told the ministry you should write down, in fact, a letter to the higher council of judges and prosecutors. There was this directive later on. However, that directive was removed, was eliminated too. There was this ministry personnel. They called me. They said the prosecutor doesn't let us continue. I said there's this general directive by the higher council of prosecutors. So, in fact, the prosecutor says there wasn't any brain death. The prosecutor says I touched the patient and the body is warm. So the prosecutor doesn't let them continue with the procedure, and the transplantation didn't take place, and probably 4 people died because of this. We thought that this problem was mostly dealt with. However, yesterday I listened to another person saying that the prosecutor objected to the procedure. In fact, there is a law in the organ transplantation law, but it says the priority is organ transplantation in accidents and extraordinary cases. Unfortunately, we should have a general provision. RBA is here. In fact, if they included that provision as a general provision, there wouldn't be any problem. For example, the transplantation of organs is not an obstacle to autopsy, they said. If they can include it in the law, prosecutors wouldn't be able to oppose it. And here, there is a necessity which involves saving a person's life. However, we still have problems about these discussions. You already heard that you do not let people donate under 18 years old. However, sometimes medical professions are very bound by law. You see, it's Akdeniz University. It took place in Antalya. It is a crime. However, this is a headline in newspapers. Why is it a crime? Because you cannot transfer tissues from individuals under 18. Why? Because we have reservations in the Oviedo. It's the only reservation. Is it a correct reservation? No. But what is correct? What is conducted now, which is against the law. So the provision in the Oviedo Convention is added to the law. You will probably say there is no problematic cases, and that's why the physicians are able to do this comfortably. You can also carry out donations from relatives. Ms. Özlem delivered a very nice speech about how we can defend it. However, the decisions of the ethical committee is administrative decision. It is not, in fact, a general decision, and you can apply to administrative court. And now the Ministry of Health says, I will write down a document to prevent the appellate review application. However, that would be unlawful. They should go to the court of first instance. They should not go to the administration, they say. That is the second solution, but that is impossible. What the Constitution says that people should still go to the administrative court. Why does the Ministry of Health want to achieve this? They want to ensure that good decisions are in fact taken, but you have to ensure that they have to be inspected by the administrative review. Composite tissue legislation is important. We have a special provision about this. For example, face transplantation. Why do we have a special one? Because it's about the indication issue. A person does not die because of face transplant, but they may die because of other organs. Here they want informed consent. By the way, we have to, in fact, congratulate the ministry for this. They say we should look for alternatives. You can use the hand transplant, but they're using prosthesis. We say there is a hand we can use for you, but you need to use medicine. You will have immune system problems. The patient said, okay, I will continue with my prosthesis. So it is not, I mean, a life-saving procedure. The person, for example, changes face. What will happen? Or the hand changes, and what will be the situation about the fingerprint? The ministry clarifies them quite efficiently. I will skip these parts. There is this important aspect. We criminalize selling the organ in 2005 together with the Turkish Criminal Code. However, if they sell it for social reasons, then they should not be punished. Is there any person who, in fact, likes selling their organs? You criminalize it on one hand, and then you say we should not call it a crime. Well, it's a crime. You will be, in fact, tried, but the court may acquit you if they think it was impossible. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, Professor Hakkari, for your presentation. You limited it to 15 minutes. That's why I would like to thank you particularly. Now, our last speaker is Volkan Dülger. He will explain the importance of regulations in organ transplantation and donation. The floor is yours.
Sayın Murat, 15 dakika yine öteki konuşmacılarımız. Buyurunuz.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Hanımefendiler ve beyefendiler, tekrar hoş geldiniz.
for your attention and your time, and also I would like to thank you to Dr. Eyüp Kahveci for his invitations, and he gave me this information that this speech should give in English language, and I try to obey this rule. And dear Professor, the Emeritus Professor Özsunay and Professor Hakkari explained both aspects of this issue in national and international, and also the other aspects of the speech. Then I don't want to explain the details. I just underline the importance of regulations framework on organ donation and transplantation. And then, in the light of the modern day medical science developments, we see brand new problems arising beyond their classic problems in medical and law science. Especially development of technology, the rise of travel opportunities, and a new sector called medical tourism coming to existence can turn people's search for healing into a nightmare and can victimize them. From this point of view, I will make some explanations about what organ trade is, and especially the necessity of battling illegal organ trade and making legal arrangements on this area. Organ and tissue transplantations can't be made sufficiently due to the lack of sufficient number of organs. Existence of cultural and educational differences and common opinion that the descent will suffer in the hereafter in organ was to be taken off to the descendant's body, and that is inconvenient in terms of religion. When the organ issue became a problem that is common in the world, the illegal trade of the started, and it became a source of living, especially for some people in Russia, India, and some of the Far East and especially Africa countries.
Slaytları ilerletecek misiniz?
Yes. In these days and age, organ transplantation is accepted as a valid treatment method in many advanced organ tissues. The number of people waiting for an organ transplantation in our country is pretty high. While there are not being sufficient number of donors to meet these needs, directs people that are waiting for organs to buy organs. It directs people that are in financial difficulties to sell organs. This case is not different around the world. It is a known fact that rich dialysis patients, especially if organ trade is forbidden by law in their country and is imposed sanction, travel the world for organ transplantation. English and German go to the India, Japanese to USA, North Americans to Peru and Brazil, and this trade is organized professionally under the name of medical tourism. Especially the kidney trade composes a big part of organ trade. Their professor explained, he gave a very famous example to us in his speech. I know him, unfortunately I know him, but the worst case scenario and worst people in the world he knows in this illegal trade. Unfortunately, Buying and selling of kidney has become highly widespread in various countries in the world. This case especially purpose buying from the poor donor and selling to the rich buyer. In other words, putting the poor in jeopardy in order to fulfill the rich buyer's health. Hundreds of kidney patients from Arab countries and Southeastern Asia go to India for transplantation. India became one of the world's kidney transplantation centers over the years because prices are low and kidneys to find are plentiful. In fact, it's called kidney market by medical doctors. A great number of back alley under-the-counter clinics that play this trade have been opened. Moreover, clinics like these advertise to attract donors and run this business under the name of rewarded gift for not to face a lawful obstacle. Terms like rewarded gift and rewarded donations are further problems organ and tissue trade has both. Rewarded gift or rewarded donation is the certain amount material benefit that's given to the donor in exchange for the organ he has given. The donor is rewarded for his donation. In other words, it is the softened name of buying and selling in organ trade. Especially rapidly increasing population in countries that don't have much cadaveric donor organs and that have distinct wealth differences like China, Nepal, Egypt, and Turkey that are located in India, the Far and Near East led to the development of international human organ trade. It is known that organ trade increased in Russia, Romania, and Moldova in recent years. But unfortunately, always exploited, uneducated, and left poor Africa is in a much worse condition. Such a bad condition that in most African countries, this action is not even regulated as crime. This is the most problematic thing. The countries should do some regulations for against the illegal organ traffic. As a result of this, a new medical application method where human kidneys are bought from poor and needy people to be transferred to a rich buyer group, and that provides brokers, private hospitals, and doctors high profit arose. Most of the time, those poor and needy people that give their kidneys doesn't get the reward that was promised to them. To make even the slightest contribution to their financial condition, which initially caused them to sell their kidney of necessity, and they are just left with what they have done. For example, according to China's human organ transplantation regulations, people who donate their organs can only be married couples or close relatives. Therefore, various mediators to document closeness related to this degree of relationship that is inexistent in material fact with forged document derived. And there is a lot of number about the percentage of the illegal traffic and some money. I can give an example. In China, Pakistan, and India, and that yes. In China, Pakistan, India, that the buyers can be priced up to the $2,000 for a single kidney. The organizations also stated that the price paid to the people who gave their kidneys is $5,000. There is a huge differences between the digits, as you can say. There are three fundamental principles in organ transplantation made from an alive donor that the professors explain us, and then I skip this. In the organ trade organization, most of the donors come from the part of the community where health and nourishment are already restricted due to the poverty and economic difficulties. It is not realistic to say that these people genuinely volunteer and they have a non-forced consent in the conditions that they are in. Besides, it is highly likely that the health, operational integrity of his organs and the life of the donor would be damaged in the transplantations that are made in unhealthy conditions, insufficient operating rooms at back alley clinics, and that are made without questioning the medical knowledge and experience of the doctors performing the surgery. Also, donors' organs, so to say, are taken forcefully by not informing the donor enough about the transplantation, by ignoring the request of the donor that back out in the last minute, by making superficial inculcations in the direction that the operation is simple, and by saying that now that you have started this process, there is no turning back. In addition to this, receivers also at the mercy of the hospital and the doctors in terms of expenses, choice of donor and quality of the examination and evaluation. But kidneys and livers are provided from alive donors in exchange for money or pecuniary advantage. By gaps in the laws that forbid organ trade, insufficient supervision or unlawful means, especially in countries where social and ethical values are not cared about. Apart from this situation causing a big mistake ethically, it is also causes complications to be seen like death, infection, rejection. In other words, it can cause a number of medical mistakes. In most Middle East and Asia countries, the religious beliefs or communal resistance arising from traditions make providing cadaveric donor organs difficult. In these countries, where ethical problems arising from cadaveric donor organs are constantly discussed, the economical imbalance in the community set grounds for the procurement of organs to constitute a trade market and poor people to become a cheap organ source, but both nationally and internationally.
Sayın Dülger, son dakikalar lütfen toparlayınız.
Okay, I will skip. I have prepared a lot of things, but I can skip to the end. For these reasons, organ and tissue trade shall be acutely complained against in this day and time. The fight put against poverty and lack of education should form the first foot of the fight against organ and tissue trade. Healthcare provides being on the alert and careful, not getting involved in activities out of deontology, and even trying to prevent such activities if possible constitutes the second foot of the fight. Third, and another important foot, consists of the need for all of the countries in the world fighting these activities. Because organ and tissue trade is a source of income odds carried by benefit-oriented criminal enterprises. These crimes are substantially processed as exorbitant crimes. Therefore, execution of perpetrators, victims, buyers, and operations are each made in different countries. Then, this is my last sentences. If you planning to transfer any organ or tissue, and if you prefer to go your patient to the abroad, of course, you first of all you should choose for medical care the best medical care, but it's not enough. Also, you should prefer the country which is regulated this issue. Then I can, without a doubt, say that Turkey, in terms of both judicial and medical, it is at an advanced level on this matter. How organ and tissue transplantation shall be carried out and the offense of organ trade have been regulated in Turkey before numerous countries, that's my professor as explains. Thank you for your patience.
Sayın Murat Dülger'e teşekkür ediyoruz.
Would like to thank Mr. Murat Dülger. Now we will invite Professor Ergün here for the Q&A session. Professor Ergün, could you kindly come to the stage? Yes, this was an interesting, another interesting session. We looked at the legal and ethic aspects of human rights and organ donation. We looked at the international cases as well as practices in Turkey, and we listened to Mr. Dülger's presentation. Lastly, now, is there any questions or remarks? Are there any questions or remarks? I would like to see all the hands if you have any questions or remarks. Dear Kapası, the floor is yours. First, I would like to thank you all. Well, we always receive applications since we are in the ministry. For example, the prisoners say that they want to donate their organs. Well, we said they are prisoned individuals. We did not give consent. We did not give approval. I would like to get your opinions. So far, we didn't let it happen. An interesting remark from Mr. Kapası. Another question. Hi. Organ transplantation coordinator Nesin from Medipol University. We, in fact, receive many recipients and donors from abroad. In the future, do you think we can have problems regarding the practices of liver cases? The ministry gives a 2% proportion. If you have carried out 100 transplantations, you can, in fact, provide emergency notification for 2 patients. In livers, we sometimes do that. Let's assume that we use the quota. We have a foreign patient, and we have to make urgent notification because of the 2% threshold. And let's assume that the patient came to our hospital. There is this need for emergency transplantation, but they do not have legal documents. I know that we sometimes wait for those documents for a month, even for a month and a half, for the preparation stage. All the medical preparations are in place. The situation of the patient exacerbates, but I cannot conduct the procedure, and we lose the patient. So these patients from outside Turkey, in fact, they kind of get victimized because of the legal processes. We say that the human life is the most principal, the most fundamental thing. I couldn't understand the first question. Well, the first question is the local documents are in place. There is no medical problem. I'm talking about the liver problem. However, the situation gets worse, and I have to make an urgent notification. I mean, urgent organ call. I have to make an urgent organ call because I filled up my quota, 2% quota. There are 2 different questions, but the source of the problem are the same. The patient gets victimized. Other questions? Well, this will be a small remark rather than a question. Please. Thank you, Professor Ergün, for your beneficial presentation, very beneficial presentation. However, just to clarify a point, the European guidelines and the global guidelines say you can get tissue from the minors when it comes to living persons. But as for the organ, there is no such application. So we differentiate tissue from organ when it comes to minors. I mean, if there is a vital life and death situation, a brother or sibling cannot give their livers to the other one, or kidney, let's say. But there is this legal draft in Turkey. We will be focusing on that. Thank you, Professor Hakkari. Also, we should emphasize death in law, right? We did not provide a clear definition of death in the law. I think that's where these meetings become all the more important. I value this day. I thank all of you. In fact, this is the first get-together of the NGOs and the professions, legal medical professions. In the past, Ministry of Health insisted that there should be a definition of death in the law, but the Ministry of Justice didn't have a clear mind. That's why they had reservations. Now I think it will be clearer for the Ministry of Justice too. Okay, thank you. The last question. It's not a question either. It's a remark from where you left off. You touched upon a very important point. We say tissue and organ transplantation, but we talked about abstract organs. As Professor Ergün mentioned, based on the Oviedo Convention, in the health institutions, there might be materials from individuals like pathology archives or a drop of blood, which may not make any sense to me. However, when they are in fact stored in researcher biobanks, then it will make a difference because you will be able to share the benefits too. So in bioethics, this is one of the most debated issues all around the world. I mean, you get the biological materials from human beings and you use them for research purposes. And the way to store those materials, to use those materials through biobanks, in fact, is a source of discussion both in terms of health and ethics and law. Especially Riyad Alexin granted those cells, and we know that now the inheritors of the question, heirs of the issue in question, in fact, dispute it. Yes, it's one of the discussed issues. However, as for the organ transplant, we may have another question, and then I will stop getting questions, by the way, to wrap up.
Thank you, Mrs. Presenter. I am from Cameroon. I am the head of structure of regulation in the Ministry of Public Health in my country, in Cameroon. So I want, first of all, to congratulate you for the high, good quality of your expose. And my concern is about how to implement a global framework of legal framework concerning the organ trafficking. Because country like Turkey, who exists a legal framework of transplantation, can push, can help to adopt. How can you help? How can you manage to adopt a global framework of legal regulation concerning this topic of trafficking organ? Because in our African country, there is not a legal instrument to prevent this trafficking organ. So how can you help us to prevent this phenomenon that is very that cause many prejudice in our health system? Because in Cameroon, we are also trying to implement a legal framework, but it's very slow. It goes very slow. because of maybe a political or institutional obstacle. So I would like to ask you if you can put in place, or if you can make something regarding the implementation of general framework concerning this topic. Thank you.
Evet, biz de teşekkür ediyoruz ve şimdi
We thank you. Is there any other question? No, then let's start. A few words by our chairperson.
Cameroon or for other countries, I think every country has lots of brain death cases, and if you use your brain death cases organs, you can do that without that much problems with the ethics, because ethics in brain death is much easier to be considered, but for living it's much more difficult. And for the framework that you said, I think it's very good to have the framework for organ donation from living or deceased or whatever, according to the national frameworks, and make it rigid. And gradually you can have some other sentences to make it much easier. But at first, I think, for example, in Iran, since 3 years ago, we prohibited any kind of transplant for foreigners in Iran. Before, we could have donors and recipients from the same nationality and have transplant in Iran. But it was getting just like a trade in Iran, and most of the centers preferred to do transplant for foreigners because lots of money could come to that hospital. But it's not forbidden. I don't say it is good, but it can save my country from trade and from many things. And after, when we are ready to control everything, for example, some people say maybe there are some relatives from other countries to want to, some countries that they don't have facilities for transplantation and they want to come to your country to do transplant. Why do you prohibit them? We say our control is not that good to control to make sure that they are relatives. So now we don't have facilities for controlling everything, so we prohibit that. Then later, when our control is much better, maybe we add this subject to our law. So for a country which is starting everything, I think more strict things is better, and then gradually you can make it much easier.
Evet hocam, Ergun hocam bu konuda sizin de söyleyecekleriniz vardır.
Efendim.
Professor Ergun, thank you for your question. Actually, I do not have a clear explanation regarding this issue, because these individuals who cannot declare their consent, in fact, is addressed in Article 14, but it tells about regenerated organs. So when we talk about minors, we can talk about regenerative tissues, and they can be taken for the siblings. However, the content of the article and the title, in fact, is different. In the text, it says removal of regenerative tissue. So the title is different from the detail below. That's why the discussions become important here. there might be ambiguous topics, but we clarify it all together. Now, Ms. Esin's question, which seems to be addressed for Professor Hakkari. Regarding your questions about prisoners, in fact, there is no obstacle. They can use their free wills in the prisons. If there is a reservation, we enlighten, we inform them, we get their consents. Okay, if you have any questions regarding their consent, that might be an exception, but there is no provision which says that we cannot take organs from prisoners. There is no problem about the deceased either. However, let's think about the living persons. Let's say that you have a relative, their organ is compatible with yours. They are in the prisoner, but you die. If you cannot receive them, then they may in fact file a lawsuit saying that the ministry did not let me have this procedure, although there was not any medical problem. Well, when I started my job as a physician, I launched an organ donation campaign, and the individuals in prisons donated their organs, which in fact hit the headlines in the past. I think it is still not well known in Turkey, considering that there are only 265,000 individuals. So in Nevşehir prison, the inmates, in fact, donated their organs in the closed prison, and the Ministry of Justice, in fact, congratulated us, and they handed out a certificate back in the past, but I don't know the opposite story about the ministry's prevention of organ donation. Well, I don't know the logic behind this immediate call for extra organ, but legally speaking, you say that this will be an emergency situation, so you will get the first transplantation, but the ministry says there is this quota. If in fact it leads to a problematic application, then you should file a lawsuit to cancel this provision regarding the quota. Or you can file, in fact, a lawsuit for indemnities, for personal indemnities. But since this is the current situation, you have to apply for it. So you should file a lawsuit for cancellation, or you should file a lawsuit for indemnities. If that is a logical practice, the court will not accept your cancellation lawsuit. As we're waiting for the documents, in our system there are subtle arrangements regarding organ and tissue transplant. However, we need these subtleties, we need these details, and we have to comply with these arrangements. I rushed through this, but the Turkish Criminal Code refers to organ donations in violation of law. So, not waiting this document may lead to the emergence of crime. However, there is also this aspect. The Turkish Commercial Code also says that committing a crime to serve a higher good means you will not be punished. However, it will be the court, it will be the judge who will determine that you were serving the greater good. But let's assume that you were there for a month and you cannot accept the idea that the person will die because of the documentation. You take all the risks, and then you will start the procedure, let's say, but then you will maybe benefit from this provision about serving the higher good in the prosecution process. There was this question for Professor Dilger.
I think the Dr. Bozoklar testify me. We have given some consultancy to African countries for their legal preparation, and we are ready as ITN group. We are ready give this consultancy every time. Just an email is enough for this.
That's good.
Thank you very much.
Evet, sizin küçük başka soru ve katkı almayacağım. Sadece size çok kısa.
I will not get other small questions or remarks. One last word, please. What I wanted to say was that you gave an example from Nevşehir closed prison. They're donating their organs after death. I believe what our General Directorate asked was about the living donors in prisons. That is the question. It may be relatives or non-relatives, and here we do not know whether they have their free will as they are inmates, as they are prisoners here. I can maybe clarify it further for you. Well, Professor Hakan's answer also covered this question. That was an answer. The next session, ladies and gentlemen, will start at 2 p.m. We look forward to seeing you here again. Now I invite only one more minute, please. I would like to invite Professor Dr. Selim Çınar to the stage to hand out the plaques. Thank you.
Tamam.